Okay, we're going to take a look at lecture number 8 now, the role of women in the Holocaust. And let me get started with a couple of comments about the differences that women often had to endure and experience as they were held as victims in some of the camps. The first articles appeared in 1985 about women being having a unique experience during the Shoah. It occurred after the 1960s women's revolution, women's lib movement, and the popularization of gender studies. Jonathan Roth wrote a book about the women's experiences called Different Voices. Auschwitz and After was written by Charlotte Delbo, which is a trilogy of her experience in Auschwitz. Very well-known book by the Holocaust historians, but not very well known by the general public. Isabella Leitner was another author. Early scholars, in 1985 at least, thought that women had a different physiological experience than men during the Holocaust. In 1985 to 2000, scholars shifted their focus and said, well, because of the tendency to nurture, women survive morally better than men. Today, they believe it was a combination of both. They used to believe that women fought more morally than men did. Men fought more physically, but today we know is a combination of, they did both. But we cannot ignore the unique physiological effects that the Holocaust had on women. Many women fled to the woods to join the partisans, the bands fighting in the woods against the Nazis. Many men, I should say. While the men fled to the woods, the women were left in the ghettos to take care of the family and keep it together. So they became the head of the household. When the men heard that the Nazis were not sparing the women and the children, the men then went back to the ghetto to protect them. Many times women could hide the fact that they were Jewish if they had the right looks, whereas men could not hide and pass as Aryan so easily because Jewish men were circumcised. So women were more accessible to the role of smuggling food into the ghetto. The role of children also began to change along with the women because children were fast on their feet and they were small and they were able to smuggle food into the ghetto as well through little openings in the ghetto wall and so forth. Other authors that tell their story, Ida Fink, Nechama Tech. Women, as I said before, were mostly in the city, but there were women during the fights in the woods in the partisans. However, they were not allowed to fight. They were basically given domestic chores and the men did the fighting. In the camps, the differences grew much greater between men and women. Women were not allowed to get pregnant in the camps or in the ghettos, yet they still did. Often they decided to have an abortion if it did happen. In the camps, 99% of the women stopped menstruating within the first couple of weeks of arrival at a camp due to the shock to their system and for nutrition. And if a baby was born in the ghetto, it put many other people's lives at risk if it was discovered. Pregnancy in the camps also occurred in places like Auschwitz and Majdanek. Women did have babies there. Some of the other women authors that have written about their experiences are Ruth Elias, who entered Auschwitz pregnant, Anita Grossman, Marion Kaplan, Carol Rittner, Isabella Leitner, Vladka Mead, who wrote Both Sides of the Wall, of her exploits as a smuggler in the Warsaw Ghetto. She's the elderly lady who I went to Poland and Israel with to study. Dr. Gazella Pearl, who was a gynecologist, forced to help Dr. Mengele perform all kind of gynecological experiments on women, and a very, very good movie about her life story is called Out of the Ashes, starring Christina Lottie. So we can start to see the unique role of women there, but we have to take it further. Women faced certain major problems that the men didn't face. Yes, they had starvation, but there also were medical problems, gynecological problems, They had the burden of educating the children while the men very often were taken away to the camps and murdered, and the regiment of work trying to stay alive. The patterns of behaviors of mothers was uniquely different. Rescue attempts for children, very often a mother would give up her child to be put in a monastery or in a private home. And of course this presented a dilemma for a woman. Problems of finding a hiding place were not easy. Were multiple problems for to find a hiding place for your children. You, number one, had to have connections, know somebody to get a place. The right look. If your child looked Aryan, you had a better chance of the child being passed off and protected. Language. Most spoke Yiddish, not Polish, and you needed to be able to speak Polish to be able to hide your children. Money was a factor because most families who were struggling during the war to take on an extra mouth or two to feed meant more money, so they wanted to be paid for it, and that's not necessarily so unbelievable. And of course, circumcision was a problem of finding a place for boys because boys could more easily be discovered as Jews in hiding because they were circumcised. The emotional issues of hiding a child were also there. The saying farewell to your own child. Loyalty. Will the people who are taking care of my child be loyal to my child? The anxiety of constantly worrying if your child is okay and still alive. Worrying about the fate and the religion. What will your child be brought up as? And the thought of maybe never being able to keep in touch with the child. The children themselves faced unique problems also. Keeping in touch, searching after their parents. They had a sense of desertion, not understanding why they had been given up. There was the abandonment factor, that children felt that they were being abandoned. Many mothers went with their babies in their arms to the gas chambers. Committing suicide, to some mothers, was a way that they dealt with finding out when their child had died. Very often, if a baby was born in the barracks, the baby would have to be strangled to keep it quiet because the discovery of the baby would endanger the whole barracks. So many times, mothers, seeing that the child was about to be killed by the Nazis, or would eventually be killed by the Nazis, would murder the child in an attempt to save the child from great suffering at the hands of the Nazis. The Ravensbrück was a concentration camp devoted basically for women. And a book written by an author by the name of Seidel, S-E-I-D-E-L, is entitled Women in Ravensbrück. And so what we see here is a very unique experience that women had during the Shoah. Thank you for the lecture.